You're listening to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast. I believe we are here with Paul this week. Are we here, Paul?
Hello, mate. Yes.
It's hard to tell sometimes. Well, it's good to have you around, because I do tend to struggle when you're not here. So let's go with a topic of your choosing. I am going to pretend like I don't know what we're talking about today. I'm going to say, what's on your mind, Paul?
Well, mate, what I was thinking, as you don't know, is to do an episode on the best games never made.
Best games or the best sequels?
Okay, all right, yeah, it's sequels. You know, you were well prepared with that response. It makes me think that you might have known what I was going to say.
I may have not known.
Now I just feel like we're gaslighting the listeners.
I am trying to make sure that we reach 30 minutes on this one.
Nice, all right, well played. That is a minor concern of mine as well.
We are almost 10% of the way there.
All right, so it is the best sequels never made, but I feel like best game never made is like a sexier catchline. You know, it's a little more clickbaity.
No, it's totally not.
No, all right.
No. But to differentiate this from the episode we did about sequels that we wanted to have made, is that these are games that were actually in some form of planning or development or some sort of it was in the cards before the plug got pulled at whatever stage of development it happened to have not made it past. So this isn't just about, I really want this sequel to have been made. This is like, we're going to look at sequels that were actually somebody out there was like, here's an idea for a game. And then they decided like, screw it. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And we're going to say, well, which are the good ones? What are the ones that we really think had, could have been a great game that we could have really liked with all the evidence pointing towards it, that it would have been remembered as a classic if they ever actually pulled the trigger on it.
Exactly. Yeah. This ain't us, lying on our backs on a grassy knoll, staring at the clouds saying it's fun to pretend, because we could do that forever. Just, in a, imaginary context, pulling out all kinds of, wouldn't have been cool if. These are games that were greenlit for at least a moment, went as far as to have at least some sort of, outline of a story or concept art or even a trailer.
Not necessarily greenlit. It's just, it's something that had to have at least been some sort of a glimmer in the eye of somebody who could have had a chance to make it.
Right. And I'll warn everybody now that the few I'm going to mention are all adventure games. I tried my hardest to come up with at least one that wasn't an adventure game. And then it dawned on me that it was so easy to find canceled adventure games because, the whole genre got canceled back in the day for at least a decade or so. So it was well easy to as a matter of fact, one of the quotes for one of the games we'll get into was the press release, let's say, is like, we've decided that now is not the time to release a graphic adventure game on the PC, which was, a really nice way of saying there's absolutely no money left in adventure games.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if I can argue against that. Definitely the money is not there as much as it used to be, but it's kind of funny. If you look at it, I don't think adventure games ever truly went away. I don't think they ever truly got canceled, although some of our favorite studios that made those games went away instead.
Yeah, no, you're right. I would say like 2000 to 06 or 9 or whatever. It was a bit of a dark age, but it's not like it was ever gone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, since you're already talking about press releases and stuff like that, what do you have for the first entry on this list?
Okay, first,
apparently it's a list now.
Well, shit. Gonna have to pause the bloody recording if it's a list so I can make one.
Top three.
All right. Top three in no order on my end, due to lack of having a list, would be, the first one I'll go with is probably the simplest one I've got to say, which was Full Throttle 2.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna sit back and take a break and close my eyes for a bit because I've never played Full Throttle 1.
No worries, mate. I'll make a loud noise when you should come back on.
All right,
So Full Throttle 2 was fully in development with LucasArts, and I believe it had a storyline. The only thing I wasn't able to really confirm was whether or not it was going to be in 3D. I believe it was. As a matter of fact, I recently was reading an interview with one of the blokes who worked on Beneath a Still Sky. He worked over at Revolution, and he said that when they were doing Steel Sky, while that was a late 90s game, they had a very hard time getting it published because publishers, retailers, etc. were basically saying, if you don't make it 3D, we're just not interested. Which was interesting because, the 3D obviously in retrospect looked quite horrible, but still at the time it was bleeding edge, and everyone knew that that's what they needed to push the industry forward. So basically it was really hard to do a game not in 3D in the late 90s, even if you wanted to. So with that being said, I'm pretty sure Full Throttle 2 was supposed to be in 3D, and that's going to be one of my kind of arguments as to why I'm glad it wasn't made.
Wait, are we talking about games that we don't want made?
I don't know. Are we?
Where am I?
I can fake left, go right. I can flip flop real easy on Full Throttle. I'm quite impartial. All right, I'll say my honest feeling is that I would like it to have been made, because why not? Like, just any more LucasArts games, cool. Put it on the plate. Like, I don't want to. It's not like I loathed the first one. I quite enjoyed it, so I can't really say with any, vehement opinions that it shouldn't have been made. So I'll just say that it was one of those games, Full Throttle 1, that wraps up very singularly. It's a nice beginning to end story. The story is really well done. Again, I well enjoyed the game. It's just like for me anyway, it's like just a solid, reliable, dependable B+ game. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's also, it didn't, for me, it lacked a little bit of oomph, a little bit of something. But my point is like the way the game starts and ends is very, there's a lot of finality. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but basically everything wraps up. There's really no loose ends. And there's a lot of movies and games where you enjoy it so much that even though the film or the game wraps up perfectly, you just want more. So there's this part of us that like hope for sequels, and then when we get the sequel, we're disappointed because it probably shouldn't have been made. Like, yeah. Like you just want more of that world and more of that character, and then when you get it, it's like, careful what you wish for, because there's really nothing else for that character to do anymore. Yeah. And I do feel like that's kind of maybe would be the case with Full Throttle. Excuse me, I'm getting excited. Because again, without spoiling the ending, which makes this actually quite difficult, it just wraps up really neatly. But at the end of the day, the game was in development. I know Tim Schafer, all those guys were well into it, and then the Dig was having crazy complications. It was a high production game. They had people like Steven Spielberg involved, which I'm sure added a lot of pressure to the situation. So they called all the guys that were working on Full Throttle 2, and they said, you got to put that on pause and come help us with this bloody Dig game so we can get it out finally. And so they did. Well,
I'll make it fairly easy for you. I'm not sure if you actually saw this, but Pam at Cannot Be Tamed, who was on, as you recall, was a guest on our show. She actually did like a whole full, very in-depth video talking about the production going behind the Dig. So if you look up Cannot Be Tamed, the Dig, she like covers everything that went into making that game.
Oh, that's awesome. Actually, I'm going to check that out right now. Why don't you guys all just listen to me listen to this?
We'll be back.
But yeah, it was with that context of the production, how the Dig was going through. Everyone from Full Throttle got pulled over to have to finish the Dig, and then by the time they were finished with the Dig and went back to Full Throttle 2, LucasArts was like, "Hey, we don't exist anymore for games."
So you watched that entire video just to say that? Okay. Well, anyways, well, I mean, sorry, I was previously giving you a hard time about like, I thought these are the best games that we wanted to get made and not the ones we didn't want to get made. And now
you do sound just like that.
Yeah. That's my impression of myself. Well, anyways, I gave you a hard time about it before, but now I sheepishly crawl back and say, like, well, that's actually exactly what I'm going to do for my first entry. This is actually kind of my number one pick, but since it's kind of a little bit off kilter, and since you've kind of already established the premise, I'll just get this off right at the beginning. But Loom 2 is a sequel. It is the best sequel never made because it serves so much of a better purpose by not being made than if it actually existed. And I know technically it would have been The Forge or something like that instead of Loom. I know apparently somebody like made an attempt at trying to make it or something like that. But I don't know. It was planned. I think they had like 3 games planned for the Loom series. And if you've ever heard me talk about Loom before, then you've heard me say this, but leave Loom alone. It was perfect exactly where it was. And some people just don't like bittersweet endings. And I'm not going to say they're stupid, but it's stupid for the game to go any further than that because it's just perfect. Like, I don't always like everything being wrapped up into a tiny little bow and just everything is all happy and smiles and fa la la happy ending. It's like, no, it ended perfectly. It was great. Like, just leave it alone. That's all. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that because just shut up.
Yeah, I'm really. Wait, was that to me personally?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just moving
just
on
making
now.
sure. Well,
you don't get a rebuttal on this. I'm
really?
Set. Yeah, I'm set. You cannot convince me that there's any. Okay, fine, you can rebut, but you cannot convince me.
All right, I'll tell you what. I'll compromise. I'm gonna rebut, but in agreement with you. So I guess that's not rebuttal anymore. It's just
that's clearly not. You can agree with me by all means.
Yeah, I don't know what the word for it is, but
agreeing.
All right, yeah. So I used to disagree with you, and it was just it was in a gluttonous way because I was just like, even if I don't like it, looking back, there's just not enough games from especially LucasArts. There's just not enough of these games that I love. So why not? Let's just have another. And it's kind of going back to what I said before, but you think you want one, but you really kind of don't. And I think Loom is another great example of that because, one, to your point, it is really nice to have a game that has a darker sort of ending. Darker is a bit dramatic, but you know what I mean? It feels like you've actually been through something. It doesn't have this, falsehood of like you said, a bow on top and la la la, which I love that bit. But it's like you think you. Okay, so the whole story in Loom, and again, I won't spoil anything specific.
No, you can spoil. Like, seriously, it's statute of limitations. It's like 30 years or something since it's been out. People have had time. You could play this game in like 4 hours. Like, seriously, it's their fault if no one's played it yet.
Yeah, that's all right. Fair enough. All right, so he goes through basically a complete arc in this game, and everything is settled and done except for the fact that things are in ruin and it must be rebuilt. And I think this is the perfect example of how it's like, well, it leaves room for a sequel so we can see, how the city was rebuilt again and what happens now. I mean, he's just left in basically a wasteland and, what happens to him. And it's like, I feel like I would say to those who want the sequel, which used to be me, I would say the exciting part is over. Like, that was the fun part. The construction and the rebuilding is probably not the best story. Like that was the fun bit. Like, just assume that they slowly rebuilt things and life eventually moved on. Because, the good part's over. Like, I don't want to watch like a city being rebuilt again. You just kind of have to ask yourself, like, what are they bloody going to do in the next one? I
will go so far as to, this is the furthest I will go to, approving of a second game is if there was something in the same universe, like they said, the Forge would have been the Blacksmith's Guild, and that was like kind of the idea for the next game. If they were going to do that in which they don't even touch, allude to, or in any way handle the events of the story from Loom 1, then I'd be okay with that. If it's just same universe, different story, totally disconnected, then okay, fine. I'll deal with that, but a sequel, no.
Okay. Well, all right. Let me ask you an unnecessarily difficult question. So, if Brian Moriarty. Is that the bad guy from Sherlock, or his last name?
No, Brian Moriarty.
Okay. If he and the entire original crew in the year 2021 said, we're going to make a new game if we can make Loom 2 and nothing else, what would you say? So basically, you get a brand new game from the original people, and it's Loom 2, or you get nothing at all. What do you pick?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd rather they didn't. I'd rather they put that towards something else. I'd rather the story just be left as it is. But at the same time, I'm not one of those Star Wars people who are like, you ruined my childhood. It's like, if they made it and I don't like it, I could just be like, I'd rather they didn't do that. I'm just going to go back to pretending this didn't exist and then just be going on with the rest of my life.
Right. And as I've found, pretending things don't exist is actually rather easy.
Yeah.
The technique I employ often. All right. Now, that was a good answer.
So, yeah, I'd rather they didn't. So I just want to say that. But if they do, I mean, like, there's worse things to complain about.
Yeah, all right. Fair enough. All right. That was good. That was a very diplomatic answer. I like that.
I like to think I'm reasonable.
Yeah. So for my next one, I've got let's see, which one do I want to do? I'm gonna do, all right, this one I've got Leisure Suit Larry 8, right. Which has had a title which would be, what was it? Leisure Suit Larry Explores Uranus. Classic. And right, very punny. What I liked about the idea for this game is that at the end of Leisure Suit Larry 7, Love for Sale, there's a post credits scene which was pretty cool. You know, I don't want to go as far as to say ahead of its time, but you know, I just said it, so it was pretty cool. So at the end of the credits, you see Leisure Suit Larry get abducted by a spaceship. Spaceship pulls down and beams Larry up, and it says, coming in 1998, Leisure Suit Larry Explores Uranus. So I would really have liked to have seen this made because they told us it was going to be. Mm-hmm. So that's, a strong reason to want to see it. It's pretty bold to be like, it's coming in this year and this is its name, and then just crickets, just nothing. So that, it's I think Larry's one of those characters, one of those series is that it's not really necessarily about like a character arc. It's just, if you like it, then you'll want to see more of it. It's, you know what I mean? Kind of as simple as that. There's no, I don't think with Larry there's really a legacy to destroy.
Oh, well, I mean,
well,
yes and no.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, there isn't. But
and I say that in the sense of like assuming, which this Leisure Suit Larry would have been led by Al Lowe. So, assuming the original creators are at the steering wheel, I don't feel like, there wasn't like a arc that they were going to break or destroy in making. There's really no argument as to why Al Lowe shouldn't have made another Larry. They didn't wrap up 7 in such a way that you get this, overwhelming sense of finality. I think 7, if you just kind of look at it on its very own, is a complete game. It has its beginning, it has its ending. And you could just kind of ignore the post-credit scene, but they did throw that in the post-credit scene.
So you're not worried that Leisure Suit Larry 8 would have like destroyed the lore?
No, I don't think so. I struggle to.
They wouldn't have contradicted the canon and retconned things.
Exactly. I don't think that it would have gone. I don't think there's a way to go full Star Wars with the Larry games. I just don't think it's possible. Like, as long as he doesn't become like a born again religious person or whatever.
Oh no, you're ruining my childhood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it seems really hard to imagine a way that you could actually tarnish Larry in that sense. Now, I don't want to say it's impossible to mess up Leisure Suit Larry, because there was Magna Cum Laude or whatever, which is, I'm sure, fine.
I don't think so. I think that was actually horrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me too. I guess it wasn't Larry Laffer in that game. It was Larry Lovable or some shit.
So there was like a nephew or something.
Yeah, really weird. And I know they did Al pretty dirty on that game. They made him think that he could be involved, and then they just stopped talking to him.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, exactly. So another reason that 8 should have been made is because if they made 8, we probably wouldn't have had to have dealt with that whole fiasco. And when I say dealt with it, having not played it, I just mean being like, oh my god, there's a Leisure Suit Larry game I wasn't aware of called Magna Cum Laude, and then seeing a screenshot of it and being like, oh, never mind.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I that's probably I believe the way you're pronouncing it is the proper pronunciation, but I think the way it's supposed to be pronounced for the sake of a Larry title was Magna Cum Loud.
Oh, that's gross. Okay. Yucky. All right. Well, they've never been subtle about that stuff. I'll give them that. Well, and so for everyone listening, it's that thing I say often that I hate.
Maybe he was Canadian. Magna Cum Loud, eh?
Nice. I really enjoyed that. I'm not sure I've ever heard you say A before, which has been disappointing, to be honest. So I'm glad you did finally. Frankly, the lack of times you bring up maple syrup is extremely saddening to me. Goes against everything I thought I knew about you lot.
Well, you've never actually sat down with me for a meal.
That's true, and I will say behind the scenes you do talk about poutine quite a bit. Anyway, so the people listening don't have to Google it if they are just now hearing about 8. I'll just give you a really quick rundown of what it was supposed to be like as I not read this off a screen. So he gets brought to a planet with like Amazonian women. They're the hunters. They basically killed off all their men because they're the alphas in the situation or whatever. And they get to a point where they realize that they can't reproduce anymore, which I guess they realized like when the last guy died. I don't know. So what I thought was clever about this was that the reason Larry gets picked up by them was tied into Leisure Suit Larry 7, which is another reason I would have liked to have seen it made, where when Larry's on the cruise ship, the PMS Bouncy, according to the screen here, my memory is not that good. Larry wins a trophy for being like, you know, the top man, the thighs man trophy competition, and he wins it for being sexiest man alive. I bet you there's some real tomfoolery behind how he wins it too. So anyway, they basically pick up a transmission from this cruise ship and hear, oh, this guy is, you know, Earth's mightiest man. So that's the reason why they choose to pick Larry up for this mission to help them reproduce their planet.
I see.
Repopulate, whatever. So anyway, that's what it was basically me about. And would have liked to have seen it. The end.
It's hard to talk about games that really didn't get much further than just like a couple of thoughts and whispers.
Yeah, it really is. I almost wish they could just dump all this stuff online at some point. Like, just tell us everything since it's definitely not happening. Mine as well.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of these didn't really get much further than just sort of like, hey, this is my next idea. And then there's like, oh. Yeah. So,
and that's a good point, because with how little, like the storyline for Leisure Suit Larry 8 that I'm reading is 2 paragraphs, and it doesn't seem to be a whole lot of thought behind it, but they were so confident in it that they put the title of it at the end of 7. They're like, well, we have a title, so, you know, we'll just write a story around the title, I guess, because we told everyone that's what it's called.
Actually, this just popped into my head right now, because and I'll include it just because I'm pretty sure this is a thing, but I totally don't know 100%. I remember the stories and like the rumors of it happening at the time. But apparently there was actually a version of Ultima 9 that got pretty well into production before it got scrapped and they started over again and made the Ultima 9 that we know today. So just as sort of a throwaway honorable mention, if that did exist, if that was true, and I am just too lazy to Google it right now, but to verify. But that would have been great, because I think, I I don't want to be too harsh on Ultima 9, but I'm going to be harsh on Ultima 9. I'd really rather that Ultima 9 was completely different. But, after talking to Richard Garriott, I understand why things happened the way they did, but I can always hope that they weren't that way. So I guess for my next one is, I guess the one game on here that's not an adventure game, but it kind of is, because it's an RPG. But it's actually Knights of the Old Republic 3, which was planned out, and it never got made. And there's a little distinction to make. Star Wars The Old Republic, the MMO game, is not a sequel to Knights of the Old Republic. It's sort of like in the same general... I don't know how to really describe it in terms of canon, what with like the whole state of the Star Wars universe as it is right now. But, it's basically in the same kind of story vein, but much later and unrelated. And I understand that they're actually making a new Knights of the Old Republic game, which I think is more of a reboot. I think they're just basically picking and choosing various pieces of the original game to basically reboot it into something that will be included into the new current Star Wars canon. So I don't know exactly which aspects they're taking, but they said that part of the purpose of making the game is so that they can reintroduce at least some of the elements into the new Star Wars canon. But Knights of the Old Republic 3 is actually an idea that they had in the sense that they always had Knights of the Old Republic planned out as a trilogy. Like, that was always going to be the idea. That was always going to be the plan. I don't know if you've played any of these games, Paul, but actually, wait, you never play role-playing games in general, so I'm sure you haven't. The first one, I played it just like a couple years ago, and it holds up. It is just a fantastic game. I didn't play the second one yet, just because I remember hearing all these horror stories about it being kind of like largely unfinished. There was like huge sections of the game that was locked away on the disc because it just got dropped. Like, I'm not talking like unlockable or anything like that. I mean, like, there's like huge parts of the game that are sort of like, screw it. We're not going to include that. Just bury it away and make it inaccessible. As people actually went onto the disc and found these files for all these things. And I think possibly there's mods now that actually try to restore as much of that content as possible. Oh, cool. So at least they eventually got that right. So even when Knights of the Old Republic 1 came out, it's like, it was a great game and still holds up in a lot of ways today. So you can only imagine with technology being a few years on, how great that could have been. So just by that alone, it was a great, awesome story. It was I loved it because it had all the aspects that we love from the Star Wars universe without being in pretty much without being in any way really directly connected to the I guess they call it the Skywalker saga now. Like, it had nothing to do with the movies or anything. I think that was just perfect. I just want there to be Star Wars that isn't just another, like, just milking what's left, trying to draw water from a stone that is the husk of the Skywalker saga. just let it go. Just leave it be now. Move on to new things. But then they do all this like, oh, let's have a solo prequel and Boba Fett somewhere, and just leave it. It's a galaxy. There's other things to explore.
Yeah, exactly. I without going off on a tangent or totally.
I've already tangented this thing like way beyond what I intended, but I just.
Well, I'll just bandwagon and say real quick, Hollywood, if you're listening, which you ain't, stop doing origin stories. Just stop.
Yes, yes.
It doesn't matter how they got there. What's the interesting bit is happening now. And nothing before that. I get it. They were once a child, and they might have went to school, and they had a bad experience, and now they're here. Like,
you know what? I actually really enjoyed the sequels, like the sequel trilogy. I admit they're flawed. I admit they're heavily flawed, and with certain people, I will spend time making fun of those flaws. But overall, I can't deny that I actually did really enjoy them. So as long as they end it now, I'm fine with it. But I totally agree with you. I think the problem with a lot of prequels these days, and especially with the Solo movie that came out a couple years ago, it's like they tend to over-explain things. I think they did this with the Star Trek reboot too, where it's like, hey, remember everything that we referenced throughout the course of the movies? Let's explain all of that in 2 hours just to prove that we saw the other movies. I'm just like, yeah. I didn't need to know how this happened. Like, you're explaining trivial things that nobody asked about.
Exactly. Like, oh, he was almost named Tiberius, but then he wasn't. Thanks, guys.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, what every Star Wars fan was saying when they were waiting in line to go see Solo was like, boy, I sure hope they explain how he got that pair of dice you see for a split second in that one movie.
Yeah. I just, but you really nailed exactly my thoughts on it. So like, prequels, just stop trying to explain everything. In fact, just please stop existing.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll end it here and just say that like Star Trek was a great example because they're like, guess what? Before Spock was a man, he was a child. And here's him getting bullied at school. Like, thanks, guys. I really needed help visualizing how he might have became a man on a ship today. It's like, these aren't the interesting bits about him. God.
Okay. So that is my second pick, Knights of the Old Republic 3, which I have not gone on a tangent about.
Well, we move on really quickly, did you mention that there was going to be, that the third game would have been official canon?
Yeah, well, at the time, possibly, but as of right now, before the new trilogy started, they said that basically all of the expanded universe, like the novels, the comics, and everything that came out before the new trilogy, that's been decanonized.
Okay, so basically it would have been canon for a while, and then it wouldn't have been again.
I guess basically, probably, yeah, we could say that.
Right.
So that's why they're making the reboot, so they could say, okay, well, now that that's been decanonized, there's a few things that we do want to keep in here, so we're going to bring it back.
Gotcha.
And they're probably going to have to do a little bit of adapting to make it a little bit more fit in with the canon of the new movies.
Got it. Okay. No, because I like the idea. I feel like it just lends gives these adventure games like some sort of weight. You were the one that pointed out to me through I believe a collection that you bought that Fate of Atlantis became official canon for Indiana Jones.
Yes,
that's cool.
So what happened was I got the Lost Journal of Indiana Jones, and it's like this. It's like a book with a lot of notes and recaps of the entire trilogy plus the other one. And there's actually a couple of pages in there between the real trilogy and that other one where it actually is dedicated towards referencing Fate of Atlantis. And this is like an official canon book. It's actually a mini version of this was included in the Blu-ray box set. So it's like totally officially official. And I also just noticed that there is in the Fate of Atlantis pages, it mentions that he meets Sophia again 10 years later, which is actually a reference to Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. So now that's actually kind of canon too, because they directly referenced the events of that game. That's
cool. That's that attention to detail I bloody love. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. So it's not even just like, oh, this game mentioned a character. Like, no, this is actually like in the pages of the Lost Journals of Indiana Jones. So this is like, it's written down in the canon.
That's what it gets my nerdness, my nerd sense tingling. Sorry, that was a gross sentence. It gets grosser when you keep thinking about it. All right, anyway, I get chuffed about that because I just like the idea of somebody who doesn't know anything about, adventure games and blah, 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 buying the Blu-ray set and flipping through the pages and being like, oh, there's something called Fate of Atlantis and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's, I don't know, something just, I can't really explain why that's, why that tickles me. Stop saying stuff like that, mate. He says to himself, oddly, out loud. All right. Anyway, I'm going to try and rescue myself. I'm going to move on to my last one, my third pick here. Before I do, two honorable mentions. One is Sam and Max 2. That game got canceled. That was the one that quote came from that I mentioned in the very beginning of this episode, where he's just like, we don't think it's smart to put out a graphic adventure right now. So that game got scrapped. Obviously, Telltale picked up on it and released quite a few of them, which I haven't checked out yet because I'm a snob about like horrible looking 3D games, and that's where that falls in. But one day maybe, probably not, I'll check them out. And the other is this is a recent one, so forgive me. I'm pulling a mulligan card here. I was just personally really bummed out. Speaking of Telltale, when they went under because they were supposedly working on a Stranger Things game, and I'm just bummed that never happened. I think that would have fit their engine and their way of doing games really well. And I was just super bummed that didn't happen. But I will say, our mates at Infamous Adventures, Infamous Quests, did a really cool Stranger Things point and click demo. That if you weren't aware of it or wherever, go check that out. I think it's on their itch.io page. I've never said that out loud. Itch.io? Yeah, maybe.
Itch.io?
Right, you gotta do the weird pause, like I think you do. Anyway.
Itch.io.
That's proper. Yeah, that felt good. All right. All right, so for my last one, and I'm saving it because I'm trying to spare everyone listening from me banging on about Space Quest again, but just buckle up. We're gonna get through this together. Is Space Quest 7? I can't not bring this up. I mean, you had to have seen it coming. It's probably has the most merit to bring up because it's. I don't need to justify this. All right, I'm just gonna. No, I'm getting aggressive towards everyone for no reason. I
don't know. I still think, you know what I'm going to say. I still think you're going in the wrong direction. I think that series should have been one game fewer rather than one game more.
I'm taking the Star Wars route. We just keep bloody making them until they're good again.
we need a prequel that explains how Roger became a janitor.
Yeah, we need but how else will I ever know whether or not he was a child before he was a man? All right, so
who are his parents?
Was he bullied that one time in 5th grade and that shaped his personality? I don't know.
They'll talk about why he's a narcoleptic and always has to nap.
Or how his stepfather made him religiously clean the house, so now he...
Wait, Roger Wilco is Gwydion?
Now I'm just thinking of a black and white indie film version on Roger. Just take all the funny things out of it. A lot of close-ups on him chewing food for some reason. All right. Anyway, so my thing with this is I did enjoy 6. And I wish I didn't, because then I could just ignore it, and the way 5 ends with him and Beatrice in the ship, saying engaged, wherever, it's a perfect end to a character's arc. But they did make 6, where they, make him a janitor again, and introduce him to
Stellar.
Thank you, Stellar, with the hot dog forehead thing. And it just baffles me as to how that happened. The way 5 ends with Beatrice after learning about her in 4 and then ending with her on 5, and then for them to just act like that didn't happen and him meet Stellar.
No, it's even worse. It's worse. They acknowledged that it happened and they still went through with the Stellar storyline. Exactly.
I was just gonna say that as one of our as one of our listeners had mentioned to us, reminded us, whatever, that at the very end of the game, they're like, "What will Beatrice think of this?" And it's like, "Oh my god, help me help you, mate. You just keep digging the hole worse and worse." Because if they left that part out, we could either say "Oh, that was just a standalone adventure," or maybe it was a prequel, or this happened. I guess not, because of the way it starts. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. It's really weird, especially that they tied that in, and it kind of sets up 7 to where it's like, I don't think anybody wants a silly, fun Roger Wilco game to be really just about a love triangle. That doesn't sound fun to me anyway. But it's I feel like that's what they'd have to address at that point. Is
That is actually a very good point. Roger Wilco as a character does not lend well to a love triangle storyline in which he's the guy amongst 2 women fighting for his attention, like an Archie Andrews. He's not. Yeah. He's not the guy that women should be fighting over.
Exactly. Not only does he not seem like that type, but he doesn't seem equipped to even be able to handle it if he was, and. Yeah, I don't know. I also kind of have to ignore a lot of the premise of 6 because it makes Rogers look like kind of a dick. Like, you know, you ended the previous game with the girl that you know you have a son with, but then you fall for a different girl, and it's super weird.
So we're saying that Space Quest 7 should or shouldn't exist?
Exactly. I'm saying both of those.
What?
Yeah. I've been going on this. I've been in my head all day about this, trying to pick a side, and I think you just gave me the out to say I don't know. Maybe our listeners could decide for me because I could see the plus. We need some closure. That, you know, tell us what the hell goes on without making it too much of a love triangle thing. But at the same time, like, you know, maybe it would be like a Star Wars where, you know, just kind of keep mucking it up, trying to get that like lightning in a bottle back. And maybe just let it be. Plus, I can't ignore that there's a trailer out there for the 7th one, and it's just that typical horrendous late 90s 3D that I probably could do without. In the end, I think what was supposed to happen happened, and that's that the two guys are going to make their own game, and we'll just be happy with that. I don't know. I guess I'd want it. Yeah, I really don't know. I've thought about it all day, and I still don't have an answer.
Well, listeners, I really hope that you listen to us as a time killer, because we are a fantastic way to waste your time. What's the best sequel ever made? I don't know. You tell me.
You tell me.
Mine's actually going to be really quick because there's really not a whole heck of a lot to say about this, because there's not a lot that has been said about this, except that Christy Marks was asked about what game she would have made in the Conquest series, and she did go on record to say that if she stuck around at Sierra and if they did make a third game, it would have been the Conquests of Charlemagne.
Ooh.
Which is pretty fantastic. And, you know, the Conquest games are actually really awesome. Like,
yeah.
I have a sentimental soft spot for Camelot, especially being of Arthurian legend, which was something which I was really fascinated with at the time that I played the game. So that's definitely up there. Objectively speaking, the Robin Hood game, Conquest of the Longbow, is just one of the best that Sierra's ever made, to be perfectly honest. Here's a funny thing that kind of sidestepping here. Kristen Marks did actually say that the second game she was going to make about, what was it again? Greek mythology. So it was going to be something conquests of, I don't know if there was never a title, but she was leaning towards Greek mythology. But there was this big popularity of Robin Hood at the time. So she was kind of swayed over towards making a Robin Hood game, and she was a fan of Robin Hood, and I think she even said like she was an archer herself, so she was like, oh yeah, I'll do Robin Hood, totally cool.
That sweet Kevin Costner mullet sways everyone.
And that is about as far as I can really say about that, because that's all as far as it really got to, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I feel like I wish I didn't know that now. I just learned it when you said that thing, and now it. Because, yeah, I would have loved to have seen that. Those games are, I mean, I say this hesitantly, they're very underrated, at least when it comes to the games that you think of when you think Sierra. Those games are bloody underrated to a degree, and she's an amazing designer. I would have loved to have seen those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and, you know, for an adventure game, like, how many times does Charlemagne get really pointed out as a topic?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It would have been really. If nothing else, it would have just been fresh and new, because, you know, there's Arthurian, that's cool. Robin Hood, that's cool. But then, like, Conquest of Charlemagne, it's like, yeah, badass.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, I love games with words in them I can't spell. Edgy.
I dare you to try.
CHARLI.
Nope.
AM. Okay.
You screwed it up. All right. Well, what do you all think is the best sequel that never got made? Let us know on Facebook. We have a group and a page. We're on Twitter at the CG Guild. We're on Instagram at CGG Podcast. We have an email, which is mail@classicgamersguild.com. If you'd like to support the show, find us on Patreon.
All right, thanks for listening, and as always, don't do a sequel. Or do? We never really got to the bottom of whether or not.
Don't murder a series.
Yeah, nice.